Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to today's webinar on business grants in Birmingham. My name's Henrietta Brealey. I'm the Director of Policy and Strategic Relationships at the Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce. I will shortly be handing over to our fantastic guest speakers, but before I do, I'm just going to give you a quick bit of background on the Chamber, who we are and what we do. Some of you may be very familiar with this already, but for those less so, we are a not-for-profit business membership and business support organisation that exists to connect, support and grow businesses in the Greater Birmingham area. We've been in business for business since 1813. So as a fun fact for you, we're actually older than the Statue of Liberty. But today's Chamber has around 100 members of staff helping businesses with absolutely everything, from finding customers locally, navigating support locally, critically for today, to also finding customers internationally through our international business hub. So odds are, if your business is looking for support on something, the Chamber can probably help. In terms of COVID-19, we've been busy supporting businesses throughout this period of unprecedented disruption between March and October. We'll shortly be updating this for November as well. We delivered over 143 top stories in our Chamberlink daily newsletter. That goes out to around 16,000 business contacts every weekday and is where we communicate what's happening, what it means for businesses in a really quick and timely fashion, because we know this is a fast-changing environment. Getting that information out is really critical. Likewise, we've also had over 20,000 views of our COVID support hub on the Chamber website. Our team have made over 14,000 calls to local businesses, delivering over 1,800 hours of phone support, just listening to every one of our members, understanding what support they need, connecting them up to what's available, and also picking up where we need to lobby on their behalf for filling the gaps in available support. We've done over 118 webinars, that's excluding little roundtables and bigger conferences awards for over 4,000 delegates. And through something called our KBM inbox, that's kbm@birmingham-chamber.com, which stands for Keep Business Moving. Any business, regardless of whether you're a member of the Chamber or not, can email in, ask for advice on the current guidance, raise awareness of areas where you're unable to access support, and we'll pick that up in our lobbying activity. We'll get you the information you need. More information on how we can help connect, support and grow businesses related to COVID-19 support can be found at our coronavirus hub, with the address up on the screen there. One bit I will pick out is our COVID support grid. So you can find this on the front page of our website, and it's a really simple tool. It basically summarises the support that's available to businesses that's backed by the government, what it is, how you can access it, where you go to find it, is it available yet, all of that essential information for businesses. As you can see, we're now on version 51 of this document, so we appreciate how quickly this can change for businesses and how important it is to get that timely information. Critical for today's discussion, you may have spotted in the news that Boris is due to announce some additional support for businesses in the hospitality sector, but we won't hear exactly what it is until after he addresses Parliament today, after today's session. So if you're wondering after today's session where you can get the latest information on new grant support that was going to be announced, you'll be able to find it here on the Chamber website. In terms of other bits to raise, we have a section freely available on the Chamber website on best practice and peer learning Q&As, where you can find interviews with business owners on how they've approached this and how they've adapted their business through COVID-19, which can be useful for just a bit of inspiration and understanding how other businesses are faring during this situation, as well as expert guides to things like mothballing your business for businesses that are required to close during this time, how to limit the costs that they will be impacted by, and also things like R&D tax credits. I mention this because a lot of businesses during this time have had to adapt what they're doing digitally. They've had to adapt websites, CRM systems, adapt digital tools, online retailing, etc. And many may not realise it, but may be able to apply for R&D tax credits, which at this time where businesses are looking for every opportunity to save money, identify cost savings, and identify opportunities, can actually be quite a nice one to look at. So there's some information available on that online there. I'll also mention the GBS-led Growth Hubs. That's the Greater Birmingham and Solihull Local Enterprise Partnership Growth Hub. They're a public organisation that exists to connect businesses to business support. If you give them a call, tell them a bit about your business, do a diagnostic, they'll match your organisation to whatever support is currently available. At the moment, they're running sessions on things like digital skills support, so through training and one-to-one support. They're doing sessions for the retail sector in particular around retail recovery planning, and also offering things like 6 months free access to Shop Happy. a platform for people who are switching to online retailing. So again, well worth looking at them at www.gbsletgrowthhub.co.uk. But that is more than enough from me this morning. On to the topic of today's webinar. So I'm very shortly going to hand over to Jonathan Woodward, Head of Revenues, Digital and Customer Services at Birmingham City Council. He's going to talk you through the grant schemes currently available through Birmingham City Council for businesses in the area. We're also joined by Alba Cadenas, Partner Marketing Manager from Finpoint. Finpoint has partnered with the Greater Birmingham Chambers of Commerce to make it easier for businesses to access finance from the UK's largest panel of lenders through a business finance hub, which she'll be telling you more about later. We're very aware that the current level of grant support available for businesses actually may not be enough for certain organisations. So Alba's here to talk you through the other finance options that are also available. So we'll have a presentation from Jonathan, presentation from Alba, and then we'll be on to Q&A. If you have a question at any point during today's discussion, pop it in the chat and I'll ask it on your behalf during the Q&A session before we bring everything promptly to a close at 11:45. If you have any technical difficulties at all, again, pop it in the chat or raise a digital hand and my colleague Jess will be on hand to help. Now, that is more than enough from me this morning. Now I'm going to hand over to Jonathan to introduce the business grants available around local restriction grants from Birmingham City Council.
Okay, morning everybody. Let me just share my screen, which I think that should be there. So yeah, for those that don't know me, my name's Jonathan Woodward. I'm Head of Revenues at Birmingham City Council. Been with the authority for 3 years, and my day job is being responsible for the billing and collection of the City Council's business rates and council tax database and the 12 bid levies that we've got in the city. And I think it's fair to say that my kind of days, 8 months in that, I've gone from collecting cash to administering the business grants that have been introduced as a result of COVID-19. So today I'm here to talk about the latest incarnation of the COVID grants, and that's the local restriction support grants. So not the easiest scheme to kind of get your head around, I guess, but there are essential mandatory schemes where the scheme details have been set down by central government, and then discretionary schemes where there's been some discretion allowed by us to cover certain businesses which we think the mandatory schemes don't fit. We've got essentially the open scheme, which covers us from the period the 14th of October to the 4th of November. And this is the period whilst we were in tiers. So we sorry, let me just pause that. So we've got the tier 2 period, which ran from the 14th of October to the 4th of November. In terms of eligibility, the clues in the scheme name really, it's open businesses that are severely affected by the tier 2 lockdowns, and it's aimed at those sectors, the hospitality, leisure and accommodation sectors, who also covering bed and breakfasts who are in the council tax list, and sector businesses in shared premises, or businesses where the landlord is the ratepayer, i.e. those on rent inclusive of rate. You may actually remember the original grant scheme didn't cover businesses which weren't in the rating list. So this is a slight change from the original grant scheme. When I say sector businesses, we mean the hospitality, leisure and accommodation businesses in those sectors. And then finally, the open scheme will also cover supply chain businesses who wholly or exclusively supply businesses in the above sectors, and again, obviously, we mean hospitality, leisure, and accommodation. This element wasn't recognised in the original grant scheme, and is something that we've added. So, I mean, I guess what everybody wants to know is, you know, how much are they entitled to in terms of grants. So all 4 grants operate on pretty much a similar scheme in terms of bandings. We've got businesses who've got a rateable value less than 15,000 will be in the lower band. So they'll be due a grant payment of £934 per 28-day period. Businesses with an RV between 15 and 51,000 will get 1,400 per 28-day period, and then businesses with an RV over 51,000 will get 2,100. However, the open scheme looks at the period of time when we were in the tiers, and we weren't in tier 2 for 28 days. So these payments actually have to be prorated. So they'll be reduced down to reflect the number of days that we were in tier 2. So for businesses who are eligible for the open scheme, they'll get £733 in the lower band, 1,100 in the middle band, and 1,650 in the upper band. For those businesses who don't have a rateable value, so like the sorry, I don't know why my slides keep moving on their own. Those businesses that are don't have a lower band or an RV, they'll be paid at the lower band rate. So typically, those businesses who are bed and breakfast, because they're in the domestic list, they don't have an RV, and businesses who are in shared space, for example, won't have their own RV. So they get paid at the lower band rate. But typically, these are smaller businesses anyway. So we'll move on to the next scheme, which is the sector scheme. So the sector scheme is basically to cover businesses in Birmingham, which are nightclubs, adult entertainment venues, which have been closed from the 23rd of March. That was mandated by central government. And what we've got is this scheme starting on the 1st of November. And we're only in a position to pay for a period of those days till the 4th of November on this scheme. That will become apparent when I talk about the second scheme. The third scheme that I'll talk about next. So, in terms of the sector scheme, who's eligible? Well, it's closed businesses, which typically are nightclubs, dance halls, and discotheques, all needed to be in the rating list. And then adult entertainment venues and hostess bars. So they again will get paid on the banding scheme of 15,000 or under, and then obviously the middle tier and 51,000 and above. But because we can only pay for a 4-day period, we need to prorata these grant payments as well, which I've displayed in red. So the sector scheme really was because there was a lot of pressure brought about from the nightclub industry because of the length of time that they'd been forced to shut. So moving on to the third scheme, which is the closed scheme, and this closed scheme is to cover us for the period of lockdown. And if you can see, obviously lockdown ran from the 5th of November to the 2nd of December, which is why the sector scheme only ran up until the 4th of November. The closed scheme is, again, the name is the clue is in the name, is there to support closed businesses, which were forced to close as a result of the lockdown. This scheme is a mandatory scheme, so the rules are set down by central government. All businesses need to have a rateable value. It's to cover sectors which are non-essential retail, leisure, personal care, sports, events, and hospitality. There are a couple of other sectors, but to save listing them all, these were the main ones. What the scheme said was that if businesses chose, a restaurant, for example, to operate as a takeaway, or there was some sort of click and collect facility, or online with delivery services, these would still be classed as closed, and these businesses would still actually be eligible. And that's because the substantive business, i.e. the restaurant, was forced to close, but BEIS, which is the central government department, didn't want to sort of stifle any innovation or penalise businesses for trying to make ends meet. So these type of businesses will be eligible for this scheme. There's also a discretionary element which has been built into the scheme, and that's where we as an authority were given an additional pot of cash, which allowed us to plug some gaps which we felt the main scheme didn't cover. So what we've got in terms of the discretionary element was we wanted to help those businesses that were not legally forced to close but were severely impacted by the restrictions. Those businesses who wholly or exclusively supplied retail, hospitality and the leisure sectors, or businesses which were in the event sector. So this is more supply chain businesses, as opposed to those ones that were physically forced to close. Again, we wanted to cover bed and breakfast businesses subject to council tax, because the scheme details said actually we could only cover businesses in the rating list and some bed and breakfast list. So we've added them into the eligibility scheme criteria. We wanted to cover again sector businesses in shared premises or businesses where the landlord was the ratepayer, typically those on rent inclusive of rates, because the mandatory scheme details again said that the business needed to be independently rated or the business needed to be the ratepayer. In these two instances, they weren't. Obviously, the sector businesses are again retail, leisure, so on and so forth. Under the closed scheme, because businesses were closed, the grant payments were slightly higher. So again, it's the banding scheme. We've got £1,334 for businesses with an RV under 15,000. We've got 2,000 for the middle band, and then £3,000 grant for the businesses over 51,000. These payments won't be prorated, and they're a lump sum to cover the period whilst we were in lockdown, so up until the 2nd of December. Discretionary payments, where we're unable to attribute a rateable value, they will be paid at the lower rate. Again, these tend to be smaller businesses anyway, those sort of businesses which are in shared space, for example. And that kind of brings me on to the final grant scheme, which is the ARG, the Additional Restrictions Grant. So each local authority was given a lump of cash as a catch-all to fund and support businesses that closed businesses that the other grant schemes didn't cover. So the ARG in Birmingham is looking to cover businesses that don't pay business rates, businesses that don't have to close but which are severely impacted. It's going to look at covering businesses which are in the supply chain but not wholly or exclusively so. And then there is a catch-all, so businesses with a just cause, where they can evidence that they've been severely impacted by what's gone on. So that's the final sort of full discretionary fund, if you like. In terms of grant funding, there's no set amount for payments that will be made for the ARG, although I think the majority of them will probably be in line with the other amounts from the open, closed and sector schemes. An element of the fund has also been ring-fenced to focus on recovery and regeneration for post-COVID-19. So it's been recognised that some businesses will need support to grow next year, and where that can be evidenced, that is what the ARG fund will be there to support them with it. It's not just about seeing businesses through the next couple of months, which is primarily what the open, closed and sector schemes are looking to support. This is looking a bit more into. In terms of how to apply, we've done a bit of work, I think, as an authority on the customer journey. We were conscious that because of the 4 schemes, it was going to be a scheme they are going to be eligible for. Some businesses will be eligible for more than one scheme, so we've gone with a slightly different approach. Everything is on the web, which is where we kind of put everything now. If you visit birmingham.gov.uk, the COVID-19 page, and then click on the support for businesses, you will see a link which you can click on for the LRSG and the ARG grants. You'll need to register for a Brum account, and within that there will be a application form for you to complete. It's a single application form for all funds, for all grant schemes. We have asked selected questions on the form, which will indicate which scheme you will be eligible for. You submit one form, we do the rest, and we will then provide you with a schedule which will sit within your Brum account, and that will explain what grant payments you've had, when they've been paid, from what scheme, and the amounts. What I will say is that the amounts on their own aren't massive, but particularly in respect of the open scheme, which is to support businesses whilst they are open and in a tiered, we're in a tier. We exit the lockdown tomorrow and we will revert back to tiers. We'll be in tier 3, so the open scheme will carry on paying grants on that 28-day rolling basis. So it's possible, we're likely to be in tiers, a tier of some description into next year. So I think it's possible the open scheme will support businesses whilst in tier 2 or above. So there'll at least be a few months worth of monthly grants to be paid going forward. What I will say to everybody is that the closing date for the grants is 31st of March 2021, and BEIS have been, central government have been very clear that we can't pay any grants after that date. So get your application in as soon as possible, because if we get an influx of applications on the 30th of March, for example, we simply won't be able to process them. So I would encourage everybody to go online as soon as possible to get your grant application in. There are a few exclusions. If your business is in administration, you're in a CVL, some form of liquidation, or you've been struck off Companies House Register, or you've a pending strike off, you will not be you'll be excluded from the grant scheme. So that's one exclusion. If you have exceeded the state aid threshold, you will not be entitled to any grant payments. And these grant schemes aren't for self-employed; they are excluded self-employed. There are other self-employed support schemes in place, which central government have said that they are there for. Just included a couple of examples, really, just real life examples of what we think will be covered from various schemes. So, as an example, restaurant forced to close on the 5th of November during lockdown. They've got an RV of 25,000. They'll be, but still operating as a takeaway. They'll be eligible for a £2,000 grant from the closed scheme. A pub with a rateable value of 60,000, unable to open to the public for the period for the 14th of October to the 4th of November, they'll be eligible for the open scheme, and that will be £1,650 grant. Obviously, payment will be prorated. We've got bed and breakfast, which is in the council tax domestic list, and that would be entitled to a grant of £1,334 for the lockdown period, and that would be paid from the closed discretionary scheme. And then finally, we've got the wholesale business who is providing fruit and veg to restaurants, but also actually retail shops. So because they are supplying into two sectors, one of which isn't closed, they wouldn't be classed as wholly or exclusively in the supply chain to restricted businesses. But it's recognised they would be severely impacted, and that's where the ARG and the additional restriction grant scheme would kick in to provide them with some support. So I only had a 15-minute slot, and there was an awful lot to cover, so I felt a bit like Martin Lewis ripping through that. But hopefully I've covered the important thing. We keep our website up to date with scheme changes, which is a challenge in itself because these schemes are changing on a very regular basis. But I would just encourage everybody to visit the grants pages on birmingham.gov.uk, keep themselves up to date.
Fantastic, thank you, Jonathan. I'd echo that.
Cool.
Do take a look. I'd also say the feedback we've had from businesses so far that have applied is that actually, even though the wiring that Jonathan's just talked us through is pretty complicated in terms of the different schemes, actually the application process, that one single form, is very straightforward. So it is really worth taking a look, getting on there. And as Jonathan says, while the grant amounts individually per month don't look like that much, actually, if we're going to be in this for multiple months, that starts to add up to something a bit more significant. So well worth doing. We've got a few questions coming through already, but before we go to those, I'm going to hand over to Alba for her presentation.
Let me share the screen, one sec. Perfect. So hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you to the Chamber for organizing this event. As Jonathan shared, this information about grants is really valuable for businesses, but if you're looking for a match funding to this grant, or you're looking for a different alternative type of finance, we deliver something called the Business Finance Hub, which is eligible and is free for any businesses in Birmingham and any businesses in the region. So let me start with the benefits of use this alternative plan B. So first of all, as I mentioned, it's free. Then we really you always in controls. So you just put an application with us, and this application will take you between 5 to 10 minutes max to apply. And then you will be able to get access to the all options we got. So you're always in control. We anonymize your data. It's no credit check. We also come down and cut the effort and the cost of people looking for business finance, especially these days. We cover the whole range of products with just one application. You can apply for coronavirus loans that I'm going to speak more in details after. You also can apply for assets finance if you're planning to purchase, let's say, a van, or you're planning to purchase something else, any equipment for your business. We are doing a lot of things in working capitals, helping businesses to improve the cash flow. Invoice finance and trade finance is key these days with all the import and export changes. Property loans is something we also helping. As Henrietta mentioned before, is something called funding for R&D. So this type of grant, you also can apply to that through us, and we will be able to help with this. So basically, this is what we do. We are like alternative business finance platform. We have like 134 plus lenders, and the number of lenders is growing every day in our panel. We've been helping businesses a lot during these few months and in the past. Yeah, we got like traditional banks and also alternative different funding providers. So you can go and visit us in the Chamber website and find just Business Finance Hub, and everything is there. And what I would like to do next, I'm going to share a quickly, oh dear, one sec. I don't know why. Okay, a quickly video telling you more about it. So yeah, this is how our platform works. It's quite straightforward and simple. So what options for business finance are there today for businesses as a plan B to the grant? Well, coronavirus loans, so you can apply for a bounce back loans or for a corona business interruption loans for the schemes. They both extended to 31st of January 2021 now, so please be sure you apply at least with some time to, your application can be submitted with no trouble. So the bounce back loans, we know really, if you want to apply for that, you need to check directly if the bank your business is partnered with, this bank is on the list of banks are eligible to supply these bounce back loans. And it's not much more we can do. We can give you advice, pointing you in the right direction, but for the bounce back loans, this is where it is. But for the civil loans, we got different suppliers into the panel, so feel free to put an application and we will be able to help finally with that. So the bounce back loans, you can borrow between 2,000 to 50,000 K, depends, and you need to be eligible for one or the other. And then for the civil loans, you can borrow more, like 50,000 to like up to like 2 or 3 millions. I'm going to show you like more details in the next slides, to is the last one. I mentioned we cover the whole type of funding. So please, if you're looking for any type of funding or for a coronavirus loans, feel free to come back to us. And we also cover the R&D tax credits that you can find out. Actually, you can get 30% of your costs in cash or tax refunds or even in cash. So it's something we can really help with that too. So for the civils, as I mentioned before, you can get between 50,000 to 5 million actually. And your business needs to be trading at least for 2 or 3 years. You need also to prove the reason you apply for this scheme is because your business is being affected by COVID-19. And there, like the chamber is going to share with everybody in the call all like what is the document you need to supply. Is quite important. You add the much information that you can to your application. So our finance expert team is able to get your application and put you in front of the lenders quite quick. So this is quite key. So be sure before you apply, you have all the documents ready, or at least you will be able to provide the documents after. You can update your application anytime with us. And yeah, basically, this is what we do. Like if you are a business these days and you are looking for alternative type of funding, we're here to help any businesses. So I'm going to share the link, the 2 key links of the Business Finance Hub and also the link of how to apply today. Feel free to come back to us anytime. And me and the team will be really happy to help you in anything we can these days. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you, Alba. And as discussed, I think it is really important that businesses know all of the different options that are available to them at the moment, as there are a range of different areas that Finpoint can support with that perhaps some of the grants that are currently available cannot cover. So really worth looking into there. And we have heard from a number of our members who've used the platform successfully and found it really simple for just cutting down on that when their usual bank can't help, cutting down on that huge search and journey that can go into trying to find a good source of funding. Right, we've had a number of questions come through. I'll start with a couple that came through in the chat earlier, and then if you've got any questions, use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Apologies, I did say chat earlier, but Jess has corrected me. Should be the Q&A function. First up, Jonathan, I think I know the answer to this, but we have a question from Sue. I'm a private training provider in the centre of Birmingham and have not been able to get any grants from Birmingham City Council since trying from April. She was unable to access one even though they were closed April to July because they left furniture and computers in the offices. We're told that was not eligible. I don't think that doesn't sound quite right to me, but we can dig into this more, Sue. Since September, we've been severely restricted with income losses. Our rateable value is 49k. What could they apply for? I think I know the answer to that, but Jonathan, would you like to share?
Yeah, so I'm not on mute. Obviously there's 2 sort of asks in that question. The first bit I can't comment on. I'll need to go on. If you can let Henrietta or somebody know your exact details. I'll have a look, but occupation, furnished or unfurnished, wasn't even a criteria when looking at the original grant payment scheme. So I can't comment on that bit. I'll need to have a look. It doesn't sound right though. In terms of the second ask, obviously it depends what period of times we're talking about, but since September, severely restricted with income loss, it sounds like you'll be eligible for the open scheme, and then the ARG on the face of it. Again, I mean, the reason that we've made it as simple as possible, if you just complete the form, depending on obviously what your answers are, we can carve up, for certainty in the background what you'll be eligible for. But I would, it looks as though it will be a open and ARG.
Fantastic, thank you. That's very much the aim of the ARG scheme in particular, is to catch those businesses that don't fall into any of the specified sectors but have been severely impacted by coronavirus. So hopefully that should answer your question there. Another quick question: hotel hasn't been closed but has been impacted. Which can they apply for? I think you picked up a few where accommodation was specified. Yeah.
Again, it's going to be for the open scheme and ARG for hotel and accommodation, not closed but severely impacted.
Fantastic, thank you very much. So we're now into questions on the chat. One is: the announcement from the Chancellor said that the LRGS closed grants would be claimable back to August. Have you heard anything on that? Does that match the official guidance you've got in terms of delivering the scheme?
No. What we've been told is that the open scheme, the open scheme can only be paid whilst we're in a tier of Birmingham entered tier 2 in October 14. So that is essentially the start date for that scheme. I think perhaps the Chancellor was referring to places like Bolton and Blackburn who entered tiered restrictions earlier than what Birmingham did. The closed scheme was for a defined period of time, which is whilst we're in lockdown, and the open scheme will run whilst we're in tiers. So obviously we'll be exiting lockdown tomorrow and we'll go into tier 3, and we're just waiting for clarification of what the funding in that scheme will look like from the 2nd of December onwards. But certainly the open scheme in Birmingham only runs from the commenced on the 14th of October.
I have to say, this is one of the challenges I think we also face at the Chamber. There's sometimes a gap between announcements from government figures and the official guidance being released. And sometimes they don't necessarily contradict, but perhaps what's hinted at in some of the announcements doesn't quite match up to the actual detail that comes through. So please do, for all future announcements, keep an eye on the support grid up on the Chamber website. As I say, as soon as we get the actual detail of what it means in practice, we post to that there. So another question: which scheme would, actually I think this one's been answered already, which scheme would a business be eligible for which is not wholly within the supply chain sector, nor leisure, retail, hospitality or accommodation, whoever's severely impacted by restrictions and lockdown? I think that's ARG again, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Brilliant. We also had a question from someone who's setting up a new business venture and looking for funding for that new business venture. I'd actually say, in the first instance, if you're looking for grant funding, it's worth looking at the GBS-led Growth Hub. They might not have anything available instantly, but what you will do is get on their systems and you'll be able to find out about funding as it comes available. And I wonder, Alba, if there's anything you'd recommend from the Finpoint start of things for businesses that are more at the startup end of their journey?
Yeah, definitely with the startup, we can help with the startup loans. So you just the same, apply, fill the form, and we will be able to pass to the right person in the team to look after the startups, and we got the whole information there. So yes, feel free to apply. We help all type of companies, from startups to limits to sole traders to large, small, medium SMEs. So yeah, definitely, yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. So, question from Mark. There was a comment made by Jonathan that sole traders are not able to apply here. I think that was the self-employed excluded from those particular grant schemes. Will there be a chamber webinar on what is available? Because I'm finding it virtually impossible to find. So Mark, there is something called the Self-Employed Income Support Scheme, and that was where I think that exclusion came in, Jonathan, wasn't it? That it's self-employed who are unable to access the BCC schemes rather than necessary sole traders. Is that right?
Yes. So if it was a sole trader in a business rates assessment, you know, would they would be eligible for the scheme. So it is a bit of a grey area actually. Certain freelancers who are operating in events industry, in the event sector, would also be eligible for the scheme. But as a rule, if the individual's classed as self-employed and would be eligible for those self-employed support schemes, then they wouldn't be eligible for the business grant scheme. Essentially, they can't have two bites of the cherry. I think that's the crux of it.
And I think it is important to note that a lot of people are excluded from the self-employed income support scheme because they've not been self-employed for long enough, or self-employed income wasn't the majority of their income for the periods in which it's all assessed. So we do appreciate there are businesses falling through the gaps in that. And I think I might be right in saying, Jonathan, that that's where those sort of special cases might come in the additional restrictions grant. If someone's in that position, can't access the grant, severely impacted, that would be a good case for that special sort of criteria.
Yeah, on the application form, there is a section for sort of that just cause. So where a business can kind of or an individual can state their case, and they may be asked to provide some backing documentation to support their claim, but there is that route into the additional restrictions grant.
Fantastic, thank you. We are very fast running out of time, so I will just answer a final question, which is actually from Philippa on, is there a £3,000 grant available for website development? And if so, where do we apply for that? Philippa, that sounds like you might be thinking of a grant scheme that was being run through the GBS LEP Growth Hub. That has now closed. However, it is well worth giving them a call, as I say, if you're a small business based in the Greater Birmingham area, and they'll be able to point you to the support that is currently available and anything that might be coming up beyond these sort of local restriction grants that we've been speaking about today. Jonathan or Alba, was there anything else you'd like to comment on that one?
No, it's quite defined, the schemes are, in terms of sectors, and if they're not wholly or exclusively sort of providing services to a specific sector, it's unlikely they'd be eligible for any of the open, closed, or ARG, to be honest.
Grand. Well, thank you both very much. If any delegates have any further questions that we haven't been able to answer today, take a look in the chat. It will direct you to our inbox, kbm@birmingham-chamber.com. Send those our way. We'll be happy to pick them up on your behalf. And all that's left for me to do is thank our panelists, Jonathan and Alba, very much for taking the time to join us today and help keep our business community informed about what supports and finance options there are out there. So thank you very much. And I hope to see you all on future webinars.